Alright, welcome back. Technical difficulties. Facebook did not like my non copyrighted music. I have proof that it's uncopyrighted. But nonetheless, just another 2020 thing going on. Give you all a few minutes to come in, and I will start the story time here shortly. Ho, ho, ho! Welcome. We had some technical difficulties a minute ago, so we are restarting the live. We're going to jump right into story time as soon as a few more people rejoin us. And Facebook did not like my Christmas music, which was uncopyrighted. I made sure of that. But nonetheless, we'll get this going. Just give me a few minutes, let people come back in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to get right into story time. I do apologize for the technical difficulties, and hopefully we'll be okay from now on because the stories that are about to be read are public domain and it states so. So, with that being said, let's get this party started.
Story number 1 of the Children's Book of Christmas Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Elisa McCaslin, May 2012. The Children's Book of Christmas Stories by various artists. Christmas at Fezziwig's Warehouse by Charles Dickens. Yo-ho, my boy, said Fezziwig. No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up, cried old Fezziwig with a sharp clap of his hands, before a man can say Jack Robinson. Hilly-ho, cried old Fezziwig, skipping down from the high desk with wonderful agility. Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here. Hilly-ho, Dick. Cheer up, Ebenezer. Clear away. There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away or couldn't have cleared away with old Fezziwig looking on. It was done in a minute. Every movable was packed off as if it were dismissed from public life forevermore. The floor was swept and watered. The lamps were trimmed. Fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was as snug and warm and dry and bright a ballroom as you would desire to see on a winter's night. In came a fiddler with a music book, and went up to the lofty desk, and made an orchestra of it, and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast substantial smile. In came the three Mrs. Fezziwig, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 followers, whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid with her cousin the baker. In came the cook with her brother's particular friend the milkman. In came the boy from over the way, who was suspected of not having board enough from his master, trying to hide himself behind the girl from next door, but one who was proved to have had her ears pulled by her mistress. In they all came, anyhow and everyhow. Away they all went, 20 couple at once, hands half round and back again, the other way, down the middle and up again, round and round in various stages of affectionate grouping. Old top couple always turning up in the wrong place, new top couple starting off again. As soon as they got there, all top couples at last, and not a bottom one to help them. When this result was brought about, the fiddler struck up Sir Roger de Coverley. Then old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig. Top couple, too, with a good stiff piece of work cut out for them. 3 or 4 and 20 pairs of partners, people who were not to be trifled with, people who would dance and had no notion of walking. But if they had been thrice as many, 4 times as many, old Fezziwig would have been a match for them, and so would Mrs. Fezziwig. As to her, she was worthy to be his partner in every sense of the term. If that's not high praise, tell me higher and I'll use it. A positive light appeared to issue from Fezziwig's calves. They shone in every part of the dance like moons. You couldn't have predicted at any given time what would become of them next. And when old Fezziwig and Mrs. Fezziwig had gone all through the dance, advance and retire, both hands to your partner, bow and curtsy, corkscrew, thread the needle and back again to your place, Fezziwig cut so deftly that he appeared to wink with his legs, and came upon his feet again with a stagger. When the clock struck 11, the domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations, one on either side of the door, and shaking hands with every person individually, as he or she went out, wished them or her a Merry Christmas.
Ho, ho,
Christmas at
ho,
Fezziwig's
ho.
Warehouse by Charles Dickens.
That was a great story. Let's go for one more.
Story number 2 of the Children's Book of Christmas Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Elisa McCaslin, May 2012. The Children's Book of Christmas Stories by various artists. The Fir Tree by Hans Christian Andersen. Out in the woods stood a nice little fir tree. The place he had was a very good one. The sun shone on him. As to fresh air, there was enough of that, and round him grew many large-sized comrades, pines as well as firs. But the little fir wanted so very much to be a grown-up tree. He did not think of the warm sun and of the fresh air. He did not care for the little cottage children that ran about and prattled when they were in the woods looking for wild strawberries. The children often came with a whole pitcher full of berries, or a long row of them threaded on a straw, and sat down near the young tree and said, "Oh, how pretty he is! What a nice little fir!" But this was what the tree could not bear to hear. At the end of a year, he had shot up a good deal, and after another year, he was another long bit taller. For with fir trees, one can always tell by the shoots how many years old they are. "Oh, were but I such a high tree as the others are," sighed he, "then I should be able to spread out my branches, and with the tops to look into the wide world. Then would the birds build nests among my branches, and when there was a breeze, I could bend with as much stateliness as the others. Neither the sunbeams, nor the birds, nor the red clouds which morning and evening sailed above them, gave the little tree any pleasure. In winter, when the snow lay glittering on the ground, a hare would often come leaping along and jump right over the little tree. Oh, that made him so angry. But 2 winters were past, and in the third, the tree was so large that the hare was obliged to go round it, to grow and grow, to get older and be tall, thought the tree. That, after all, is the most delightful thing in the world. In autumn, the woodcutters always came and felled some of the largest trees. This happened every year, and the young fir tree that had now grown to a very comely size trembled at the sight, for the magnificent great trees fell to the earth with noise and cracking. The branches were lopped off, and the tree looked long and bare. They were hardly to be recognized, and then they were laid in carts, and the horses dragged them out of the woods. Where did they go to? What became of them? In spring, when the swallows and the storks came, the tree asked them, "Don't you know where they have been taken? Have you not met them anywhere?" The swallows did not know anything about it, but the stork looked musing, nodded his head, and said, "Yes, I think I know. I met many ships as I was flying hither from Egypt. On the ships were magnificent masts, and I venture to assert that it was they that smelt so of fur. I may congratulate you, for they lifted themselves on high most majestically. Oh, were I but old enough to fly across the sea! But how does the sea look in reality? What is it like?" "That would take a long time to explain," said the stork, and with these words off he went. "Rejoice in thy growth," said the sunbeams. "Rejoice in thy vigorous growth and in the fresh life that moveth within thee." And the wind kissed the tree, and the dew wept tears over him. But the fir understood it not. When Christmas came, quite young trees were cut down, trees which often were not even as large or of the same age as the fir tree, who could never rest, but always wanted to be off. These young trees, and they were always the finest looking, retained their branches. They were laid on carts, and the horses drew them out of the woods. "Where are they going to?" asked the fir. "They are not taller than I. There was one indeed that was considerably shorter. And why do they retain all their branches? Whither are they taken?" We know," chirped the sparrows. "We have peeped in at the windows in the town below. We know whither they are taken. The greatest splendor and the greatest magnificence one can imagine await them. We peeped through the windows and saw them planted in the middle of the warm room and ornamented with the most splendid things, with gilded apples, with gingerbread, with toys, and many hundred lights." "And then?" asked the fir tree, trembling in every bough. "And then? What happens then?" "We did not see anything more. It was incomparably beautiful." "I would fain know if I am destined for so glorious a career," cried the tree, rejoicing. "That is still better than to cross the sea. What a longing do I suffer! Were Christmas but come! I am now tall, and my branches spread like the others that were carried off last year. Oh, were I but already on the cart! Were I in the warm room with all the splendor and magnificence! Yes, then something better, something still grander, will surely follow, or wherefore should they thus ornament me? Something better, something still grander, must follow. But what? Oh, how I long, how I suffer! I do not know myself what is the matter with me." "Rejoice in our presence," said the air and the sunlight. "Rejoice in thy own fresh youth." But the tree did not rejoice at all. He grew and was green both winter and summer. People, they saw him, said, "What a fine tree!" And toward Christmas he was one of the first that was cut down. The axe struck deep into the very pith. Story number 2 could see that it was a cask, for green cloth was hung all around it, and it stood on a large gaily colored carpet. Oh, how the tree quivered! What was to happen? Their servants as well as the young ladies decorated it. On one branch there hung little nets cut out of colored paper, and each net was filled with sugar plums. And among the other boughs gilded apples and walnuts were suspended, looking as though they had grown there. And little blue and white capers were placed among the leaves, dolls that looked for all the world like men. The tree had never beheld such before, were seen among the foliage, and at the very top a large star of gold tinsel was fixed. It was really splendid, beyond description splendid. This evening, said they all, how it will shine this evening. Oh, thought the tree, if the evening were but come, if the tapers were but lighted, and then I wonder what will happen. Perhaps the other trees from the forest will come to look at me. Perhaps the sparrows will beat against the window panes. I wonder if I shall take root here, and winter and summer stand covered with ornaments. He knew very much about the matter, but he was so impatient for sheer longing, he got a pain in his back. And this with trees is the same thing as a headache with us. The candles were now lighted. What brightness, what splendor! The tree trembled so in every bough that one of the tapers set fire to the foliage. It blazed up splendidly. Help, help, cried the young ladies, and they quickly put out the fire. Now the tree did not even dare tremble. What a state he was in! He was so uneasy lest he should lose something of his splendor that he was quite bewildered amidst the glare and brightness. When suddenly both folding doors opened, and a troop of children rushed in as if they would upset the tree. The older persons followed quietly. The little ones stood quite still, but it was only for a moment. Then they shouted so that the whole place re-echoed with their rejoicing. They danced round the tree, and one present after the other was pulled off. What are they about, thought the tree. What is to happen now? And the lights burned down to the very branches, and as they burned down they were put out, one after the other. And then the children had permission to plunder the tree, so they fell upon it with such violence that all its branches cracked. If it had not been fixed firmly in the cask, it would certainly have tumbled down. The children danced about with their beautiful playthings. No one looked at the tree except the old nurse, who peeped between the branches, but it was only to see if there was a fig or an apple left that had been forgotten. A story, cried the children, drawing a little fat man toward the tree. He seated himself under it and said, Now we are in the shade, and the tree can listen too, but I shall tell only one story. Now which will you have, that about Ivedy-Avedy, or about Klumpy-Dumpy, who tumbled downstairs and yet after all came to the throne and married the princess? Ivedy-Avedy, cried some. Klumpy-Dumpy, cried the others. There was such a bawling and screaming, the fir tree alone was silent, and he thought to himself, Am I not to bawl with the rest? Am I to do nothing whatever? For he was one of the company, and had done what he had to do. And the man told about Klumpy-Dumpy, that tumbled down, who notwithstanding came to the throne, and at last married the princess. And the children clapped their hands and cried out, Oh, go on, do go on. They wanted to hear about Ivedy-Avedy too, but the little man only told them about Klumpy-Dumpy. The fir tree stood quite still and absorbed in thought. The birds in the woods had never related the like of this. Klumpy-Dumpy fell downstairs, and yet he married the princess. Yes, that's the way of the world, thought the fir tree, and believed it all, because the man who told the story was so good-looking. Well, who knows? Perhaps I may fall downstairs too and get a princess as wife. And he looked forward with joy to the morrow, when he hoped to be decked out again with lights, playthings, fruits, and tinsel. I won't tremble tomorrow, thought the fir tree. I will enjoy to the full all my splendor. Tomorrow I shall hear again the story of Klumpy-Dumpy, and perhaps that of Ivedy-Avedy too. And the whole night the tree stood still and in deep thought. In the morning the servant and the housemaid came in. Now then the splendor will begin again, thought the fir. But they dragged him out of the room and up the stairs into the loft. And here in a dark corner, where no daylight could enter, they left him. What's the meaning of this, thought the tree. What am I to do here? What shall I hear now, I wonder? And he leaned against the wall, lost in reverie. Time enough had he, too, for his reflections, for day and nights passed on, and nobody came up. And when at last somebody did come, it was only to put some great trunks in a corner out of the way. There stood the tree quite hidden. It seemed as if he had been entirely forgotten. "'Tis now winter out of doors," thought the tree. "The earth is hard and covered with snow. Men cannot plant me now, and therefore I have been put up here under shelter till the springtime comes. How thoughtful that is! How kind man is, after all! If it only were not so dark here and so terribly lonely, not even a hare. And out in the woods it was so pleasant when the snow was on the ground, and the hare leaped by, yes, even when he jumped over me. But I did not like it then. It is really terribly lonely here." "Squeak, squeak," said a little mouse, at the same moment, peeping out of his hole, and then another little one came. They sniffed about the fir tree, rustled among the branches. "It is dreadfully cold," said the mouse, "but for that it would be delightful here, old fir, wouldn't it?" "I am by no means old," said the fir tree. "There's many a one considerably older than I am." "Where do you come from?" asked the mice, "and what can you do?" They were so extremely curious. "Tell us about the most beautiful spot on the earth. Have you never been there? Were you never in the larder where cheeses lie on the shelves and hams hang from above, where one dances about on tallow candles, that place where one enters lean and comes out again fat and portly?" "I know no such place," said the tree, "but I know the woods, where the sun shines, where the little birds sing." And then he told all about his youth, and the little mice had never heard the like before, and they listened and said, "Well, to be sure, how much you have seen! How happy you must have been!" "I," said the fir tree, thinking over what he had himself related. "Yes, in reality those were happy times." And then he told about Christmas Eve, when he was decked out with cakes and candles. "Oh," said the little mice, "how fortunate you have been, old fir tree." "I am by no means old," said he. "I came from the woods this winter. I am in my prime, and am only rather short for my age." "What delightful stories you know," said the mice, and the next night they came with 4 other little mice, who were to hear what the tree recounted. And the more he related, the more plainly he remembered all himself, and it appeared as if those times had really been happy times. But they may still come. They may still come. Klumpy Dumpy fell downstairs, and yet he got a princess. And he thought at the moment of a nice little birch tree growing out in the woods. To the fir, that would be a real charming princess. "Who is Klumpy Dumpy?" asked the mice. So then the fir tree told the whole fairy tale, for he could remember every single word of it, and the little mice jumped for joy up to the very top of the tree. Next night 2 more mice came, and on Sunday 2 rats even. But they said the stories were not interesting, which vexed the little mice, and they too now began to think them not so very amusing either. "Do you know only one story?" asked the rats. "Only that one," answered the tree. "I heard it on my happiest evening, but I did not then know how happy I was." "It is a very stupid story. Don't you know one about bacon and tallow candles? Can't you tell any larder stories?" "No," said the tree. "Then goodbye," said the rats, and they went home. At last the little mice stayed away also, and the tree sighed. "After all, it was very pleasant when the sleek little mice sat around me and listened to what I told them. Now that too is over, but I will take good care to enjoy myself when I am brought out again." But when was that to be? Why, one morning there came a quantity of people and set to work in the loft. The trunks were moved. The tree was pulled out and thrown, rather hard it is true, down on the floor. But a man drew him towards the stairs where the daylight shone. "Now a merry life will begin again," thought the tree. He felt the fresh air, the first sunbeam, and now he was out in the courtyard. All passed so quickly, there was so much going on around him, that the tree quite forgot to look to himself. The court adjoined a garden, and all was in flower. The roses hung so fresh and odorous over the balustrade. The lindens were in blossom. The swallows flew by and said, "Queer vit, my husband is come." But it was not the fir tree that they meant. "Now then, I shall really enjoy life," said he exultantly, and spread out his branches. But alas, they were all withered and yellow. It was in a corner that he lay, among weeds and nettles. The golden star of tinsel was still on the top of the tree and glittered in the sunshine. In the courtyard, some of the merry children were playing, who had danced at Christmas round the fir tree, and were so glad at the sight of him. One of the youngest ran and tore off the golden star. "Only look what is still on the ugly old Christmas tree," said he, trampling on the branches so that they all cracked beneath his feet, and the tree beheld all the beauty of the flower.
Well, that was a great story. Evidently, it got cut off. So, I do apologize. Do we want to hear one more? We got the time. How you guys doing on hot cocoa? Mine's still warm. Ah, so good. All right, let's do one more song and then we'll call it a night. Let's see here. Let's go with this one.
Story number 6 of the Children's Book of Christmas Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer,
Hi, Katie.
please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Elisa
What is the
McCaslin,
name of your
May
kiddos?
2012.
I'd like to do a personal
The
shout
Children's
out
Book
to
of
them.
Christmas Stories by various artists.
Hi, Megan.
Little Girl's Christmas by Winifred E. Lincoln. It was Christmas Eve, and Little Girl had just hung up her stocking by the fireplace, right where it would be all ready for Santa when he slipped down the chimney. She knew he was coming.
Hi, Lily and
because,
Shelby.
well,
You
because it was
two
Christmas
girls
Eve,
have been
and
so
because he
wonderful
always
this
had
year.
come to leave gifts
I've
for
had
her
my
on all
eye
the other
on you
Christmas
the whole
Eves that she
time.
could remember.
I'm so
And
proud
because
of
she
you
had
for
seen these
everything
pictures
you've done
everywhere
with the
downtown
lockdown
that
of
afternoon
COVID.
when she was out
You
with
guys
Mother.
are troopers.
Still, she
And
wasn't
you are
just
so
satisfied.
good to your mama.
Way down in her heart,
You
she
will
was a little
definitely
uncertain, you
be
see.
on the
When you
nice
have never
list.
really and truly seen a person with your very own eyes, it's hard to feel as if you exactly believed in them, even though that person always has left beautiful gifts for you every time he has come. "Oh, he'll come," said Little Girl. "I just know he will be here before morning, but somehow I wish—" "Well, what do you wish?" said a tiny voice close by her, so close that Little Girl fairly jumped when she heard it. "Why, I wish I could see Santa myself. I'd just like to go and see his house and his workshop, and ride in his sleigh, and know Mrs. Santa. 'Twould be much fun, and then I'd know for sure." "Why don't you go then?" said Tiny Voice. "It's easy enough. Just try on these shoes and take this light in your hand, and you'll find your way all right." So Little Girl looked down on the hearth, and there were two cunning little shoes side by side, and a little spark of a light close to them, just as if they were all made out of one of the glowing coals of the wood fire. Such cunning shoes as they were, Little Girl could hardly wait to pull off her slippers and try them on. They looked as if they were too small, but they weren't. They fitted exactly right. And just as Little Girl had put them both on and had taken the light in her hand, along came a little breath of wind, and away she went up the chimney along with ever so many other little sparks, past the soot fairies and out into the open air, where Jack Frost and the starbeams were all busy at work, making the world look pretty for Christmas. Away went Little Girl, two shoes, bright light and all, higher and higher, until she looked like a wee bit of a star up in the sky. It was the funniest thing, but she seemed to know the way perfectly, and didn't have to stop to make inquiries anywhere. You see, it was a straight road all the way, and when one doesn't have to think about turning to the right or the left, it makes things very much easier. Pretty soon Little Girl noticed that there was a bright light all around her. Oh, a very bright light. And right away something down in her heart began to make her feel very happy indeed. She didn't know that the Christmas spirits and little Christmas fairies were all around her, and even right inside her, because she couldn't see a single one of them, even though her eyes were very bright and could usually see a great deal. But that was just it, and little girl felt as if she wanted to laugh and sing and be glad. It made her remember the sick boy who lived next door, and she said to herself that she would carry him one of her prettiest picture books in the morning so that he could have something to make him happy all day. By and by, when the bright light all around her had grown very, very much brighter, little girl saw a path right in front of her, all straight and trim, leading up a hill to a big, big house with ever and ever so many windows in it. When she had gone just a bit nearer, she saw candles in every window, red and green and yellow ones, and every one burning brightly. So little girl knew right away that these were Christmas candles to light her on her journey and make the way dear for her. And something told her that this was Santa's house, and that pretty soon she would perhaps see Santa himself. Just as she neared the steps, and before she could possibly have had time to ring the bell, the door opened of itself as wide as could be, and there stood, not Santa himself, don't think it, but a funny little man with slender little legs and a roly-poly stomach which shook every now and then when he laughed. You would have known right away, just as little girl knew, that he was a very happy little man, and you would have guessed right away, too, that the reason he was so roly-poly was because he laughed and chuckled and smiled all the time. For it's only sour, cross folks who are thin and skimpy. Quick as a wink, he pulled off his little peaked red cap, smiled the broadest kind of smile, and said, "Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas! Come in, come in!" So in went little girl, holding fast to little man's hand, and when she was really inside, there was the jolliest, reddest fire all glowing and snapping. And there were little man and all his brothers and sisters, who said their names were Merry Christmas and Good Cheer, and ever so many other jolly-sounding things. And there was such a lot of them that little girl just knew she never could count them, no matter how long she tried. All around her were bundles and boxes and piles of toys and games, and little girl knew that these were all ready and waiting to be loaded into Santa's big sleigh for his reindeer to whirl them away over cloud tops and snowdrifts to the little people down below who had left their stockings all ready for him. Pretty soon all the little good cheer brothers began to hurry and bustle and carry out the bundles as fast as they could to the steps where little girl could hear the jingling bells and the stamping of hooves. So little girl picked up some bundles and skipped along too, for she wanted to help a bit herself. It's no fun whatever at Christmas unless you can help, you know, and there in the yard stood the biggest sleigh that little girl had ever seen. And the reindeer were all stamping and prancing and jingling the bells on their harnesses, because they were so eager to be on their way to the earth once more. She could hardly wait for Santa to come, and just as she had begun to wonder where he was, the door opened again, and out came a whole forest of Christmas trees. At least, it looked just as if the whole forest had started out for a walk somewhere, but a second glance showed little girl that there were thousands of Christmas sprites, and that each one carried a tree or a big Christmas wreath on his back. Behind them all, she could hear someone laughing loudly and talking in a big jovial voice that sounded as if he were good friends with the whole world. And straightway she knew that Santa himself was coming. Little girl's heart went pit-a-pat for a minute while she wondered if Santa would notice her, but she didn't have to wonder long, for he spied her at once and said, "Bless my soul, who's this? And where did you come from?" Little girl thought perhaps she might be afraid to answer him, but she wasn't one bit afraid. You see, he had such a kind little twinkle in his eyes that she felt happy right away as she replied, "Oh, I'm little girl, and I wanted so much to see Santa that I just came, and here I am." "Ho, ho, 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 ho," laughed Santa, "and here you are. Wanted to see Santa, did you? And so you came. Now that's very nice. And it's too bad I'm in such a hurry, for we should like nothing better than to show you about and give you a real good time. But you see, it is 11:15 now, and I must be on my way at once, else I'll never reach that first chimney top by midnight. I'd call Mrs. Santa and ask her to get you some supper, but she's busy finishing doll's clothes, which must be done before morning, and I guess we'd better not bother her. Is there anything that you would like, little girl?" And good old Santa put his big warm hand on little girl's curls, and she felt its warmth and kindness clear down to her very heart. You see, my dears, that even though Santa was in such a great hurry, he wasn't too busy to stop and make someone happy for a minute, even if it was someone no bigger than little girl. So she smiled back into Santa's face and said, "Oh, Santa, if I could only ride down to Earth with you behind those splendid reindeer, I'd love to go. Won't you please take me? I'm so small that I won't take up much room on the seat, and I'll keep very still and not bother one bit." Then Santa laughed, such a laugh, big and loud and rollicking, and he said, "Wants a ride, does she? Well, well, shall we take her, little elves? Shall we take her, little fairies? Shall we take her, good reindeer?" And all the little elves hopped and skipped and brought little girl a sprig of holly, and all the little fairies bowed and smiled and brought her a bit of mistletoe. And all the good reindeer jingled their bells loudly, which meant, "Oh, yes, let's take her. She's a good little girl. Let her ride." And before little girl could even think, she found herself all tucked up in the big fur robes beside Santa, and away they went, right out into the air over the clouds, through the Milky Way, and right under the very handle of the Big Dipper, on toward the Earthland, whose lights little girl began to see twinkling away down below her. Presently, she felt the runners scrape upon something, and she knew they must be on someone's roof, and that Santa would slip down someone's chimney in a minute. How she wanted to go too. You see, if you had never been down a chimney and seen Santa fill up the stockings, you would want to go quite as much as little girl did, now wouldn't you? So, just as little girl was wishing as hard as ever she could wish, she heard a tiny voice say, "Hold tight to his arm, hold tight to his arm." So she held Santa's arm tight and close, and he shouldered his pack, never thinking that it was heavier than usual, and with a bound and a slide, there they were, Santa, little girl, pack and all, right in the middle of a room where there was a fireplace and stockings all hung up for Santa to fill. Just then Santa noticed little girl. He had forgotten all about her for a minute, and he was very much surprised to find that she had come too. "Bless my soul," he said, "where did you come from, little girl? And how in the world can we both get back up that chimney again? It's easy enough to slide down, but it's quite another matter to climb up again." And Santa looked real worried, but little girl was beginning to feel very tired by this time, for she had had a very exciting evening. So she said, "Oh, never mind me, Santa. I've had such a good time, and I'd just as soon stay here a while as not. I believe I'll curl up on his hearth rug a few minutes and have a little nap, for it looks as warm and cozy as our own hearth rug at home. And, why, it is our own hearth, and it's my own nursery, for there is Teddy Bear in his chair where I leave him every night, and there's Bunny Cat curled up on his cushion in the corner." And little girl turned to thank Santa and say goodbye to him, but either he had gone very quickly or else she had fallen asleep very quickly. She never could tell which, for the next thing she knew, Daddy was holding her in his arms and was saying, "What is my little girl doing here? She must go to bed, for it's Christmas Eve, and old Santa won't come if he thinks there are any little folks about." But little girl knew better than that, and when she began to tell him all about it and how the Christmas fairies had welcomed her and how Santa had given her such a fine ride, Daddy laughed and said, "You've been dreaming, little girl, you've been dreaming." But little girl knew better than that, too, for there on the hearth was a little black coal which had given her 2 shoes and bright light, and tight in her hand she held a holly berry which one of the Christmas sprites had placed there. More than all that, there she was on the hearth rug herself, just as Santa had left her, and that was the best proof of all. The trouble was, Daddy himself had never been a little girl, so he couldn't tell anything about it. But we know she hadn't been dreaming now, don't we, my dears? End of Little Girl's Christmas by Winifred E. Lincoln.
That was a great story and a very fond memory of mine as well. I appreciate you guys joining me. We could do one more real quick one if you want. I see people coming in and out of the chat. I know we had a little rough start getting going, but what do you think? One more short one? Lily? Shelby, you out there? Matthew? Okay. Mama Katie says yes. All right. Here we go.
Story number 4 of the Children's Book of Christmas Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Elisa McCaslin, May 2012. The Children's Book of Christmas Stories by various artists. The Shepherds and the Angels, adapted from the Bible. And there were shepherds in the same country, abiding in the field, and keeping watch by night over their flock. And an angel of the Lord stood by them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them. And they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Be not afraid, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all the people. For there is born to you this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this is a sign unto you. Ye shall find a babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, and lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly hosts, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. And it came to pass, when the angels went away from them into heaven, the shepherds said one to another, Let us now go even unto Bethlehem, and see this thing that is come to pass, which the Lord hath made known unto us. And they came with haste, and found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in the manger. And when they saw it, they made known concerning the saying which was spoken to them about this child. And all that heard it wondered at the things which were spoken unto them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these sayings, pondering them in her heart. And the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had heard and seen, even as it was spoken unto them. And when 8 days were fulfilled, his name was called Jesus. End of The Shepherds and the Angels, adapted from the Bible.
Well, that was not what I was expecting. The problem is I don't have any titles, so I don't know what they are until I push play. Let's try this one. It's a little bit longer, but not as long as the others. And then this old man's going to have to go to bed.
Story number 13 of the
Getting a
Children's
little
Book
tired.
of Christmas Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Elisa McCaslin, June 2012.
Christmas.
The Children's Book of Christmas Stories by various artists. The Bird's Christmas by F.E. Mann. Chick-a-dee-dee-dee-dee, chick-a-dee-dee-dee-dee, chick-a cheer up, chee-chee, cheer up, chee-chee, tira-lee, tira-lee, tira-lee. Rap-a-tap, a-tap, a-tap, went the woodpecker. Mrs. Chickadee may speak first. Friends, began Mrs. Chickadee, why do you suppose I called you together? Because it's the day before Christmas, twittered Snow Bunting, and you're going to give a Christmas party, chirped the robin. And you want us all to come, said Downy Woodpecker. Hooray, 3 cheers for Mrs. Chickadee. Hush, said Mrs. Chickadee, and I'll tell you all about it. Tomorrow is Christmas Day, but I don't want to give a party. Chee, 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 cried Robin, Rusty Breast. Chee, chee, chee. Just listen to my little plan, said Mrs. Chickadee, for indeed I want you all to help. How many remember Thistle Goldfinch, the happy little fellow who floated over the meadows through the summer and fall? Cheer up, chee-chee, cheer up, chee-chee. I do, sang the robin. How he loved to sway on thistle tops. Yes, said Downy Woodpecker, and didn't he sing all about blue skies and sunshine and happy days, with his sweet, 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 a twitter, witter, 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 wee, tweet. Tira-lee, tira-lee, said Snow Bunting. We've all heard of Thistle Goldfinch, but what can he have to do with our Christmas party? He's away down south now, and wouldn't care if you gave a dozen parties. Oh, but he isn't. He's right in these very woods. Why, you don't mean. Indeed, I do mean every single word. Yesterday I was flitting about among the trees, peeking at a dead branch here and a bit of moss there, and before I knew it, I found myself away over at the other side of the woods. Chick-a-dee-dee, chick-a-dee-dee, I sang as I turned my bill toward home. Just then I heard the saddest little voice pipe out, "Dearie me, dearie me," and there on the sunny side of a branch perched a lonesome bit of yellowish down. I went up to see what it was, and found dear little Thistle Goldfinch. He was very glad to see me, and soon told his short story. Through the summer, Papa and Mama Goldfinch and all the brothers and sisters had a fine time, singing together, fluttering over thistle tops, or floating through the balmy air. But when little Jack Frost walked through the trees, Papa Goldfinch said, "It is high time we went south. All were ready but Thistle." He wanted to stay through the winter and begged so hard that Papa Goldfinch soberly said, "Try it, my son, but do find a warm place to stay in at night." Then off they flew, and Thistle was alone. For a while he was happy. The sun shone warm through the middle of the day, and there were fields and meadows full of seeds. You all remember how sweetly he sang for us then? But by and by the cold north wind came whistling through the trees, and chilly Thistle woke up one gray morning to find the air full of whirling snowflakes. He didn't mind the light snows. Goldenrod and some high grasses were too tall to be easily covered, and he got seeds from them. But now that the heavy snows have come, the poor little fellow is almost starved, and if he doesn't have a warm place to sleep in these cold nights, he'll surely die. Mrs. Chickadee paused a minute. The birds were so still she could hear the pine trees whisper. Then she went on. I comforted the poor little fellow as best I could, and showed him where to find a few seeds. Then I flew home, for it was bedtime. I tucked my head under my wing to keep it warm, and thought, and thought, and thought. And here's my plan. We chickadees have a nice warm home here in the spruce trees, with their thick, heavy boughs to shut out the snow and cold. There's plenty of room, so Thistle could sleep here all winter. We would let him perch on a branch, when we chickadees would nestle around him until he was as warm as in the lovely summer time. These cones are so full of seeds that we could spare him a good many, and I think that you robins might let him come over to your pines some day and share your seeds. Downy Woodpecker must keep his eyes open as he hammers the trees, and if he spies a supply of seeds, he will let us know at once. Snow Bunting is only a visitor, so I don't expect him to help, but I wanted him to hear my plan with the rest of you. Now you will try, won't you, everyone? Cheer up, tira-lee. Indeed, we'll try. Let's begin right away. Don't wait until tomorrow. Who'll go and find Thistle? I will, chirped Robin Rusty Breast, and off he flew to the place which Mrs. Chickadee had told of, at the other side of the wood. There, sure enough, he found Thistle Goldfinch, sighing, "Dearie me, dearie me, the winter's so cold and I'm here all alone." "Cheer up, chee-chee," piped the robin. Cheer up, I'm here, and I mean to stay. What if the winter is drear? Cheer up anyway." "But the snow is so deep," said Thistle, and the robin replied, "Soon the snow'll be over and gone, run and rippled away. What's the use of looking forlorn? Cheer up, I say." Then he told Thistle all their plans, and wasn't Thistle surprised? Why, he just couldn't believe a word of it till they reached Mrs. Chickadee's, and she said it was all true. They fed him and warmed him, then settled themselves for a good night's rest. Christmas morning, they were chirping gaily, and Thistle was trying to remember the happy song he sang in the summertime, when there came a whir of wings as Snow Bunting flew down. "Tira-lee, tira-lee, tira-lee," said he. "Can you fly a little way?" "Oh, yes," replied Thistle. "I think I could fly a long way." "Come on then," said Snow Bunting. "Everyone who wants a Christmas dinner, follow me." That was every word he would say, so what could they do but follow? Soon they came to the edge of the wood, and then to a farmhouse. Snow Bunting flew straight up to the piazza, and there stood a dear little girl in a warm hood and cloak, with a pail of birdseed on her arm and a dish of breadcrumbs in her hand. As they flew down, she said, "And here are some more birdies who have come for a Christmas dinner. Of course you shall have some, you dear little things." And she laughed merrily to see them dive for the crumbs. After they had finished eating, Elsie, that was the little girl's name, said, "Now, little birds, it is going to be a cold winter. You had better come here every day to get your dinner. I'll always be glad to see you." "Cheer up, chee-chee, cheer up, chee-chee." Thank you, cried the robins. "Tira-lee, tira-lee, tira-lee." Thank you, twittered Snow Bunting. "Chick-a-dee-dee-dee-dee, chick-a-dee-dee-dee-dee, chick-a-dee-dee-dee-dee." "How kind you are," sang the chickadees. And Thistle Goldfinch, yes, he remembered his summer song, for he sang as they flew away, "Sweet, sweet, 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 a twitter, witter, 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 wee, twee." Notes. 1. The Robin Song is from Birds Talk by Mrs. A.D.T. Whitney. 2. The facts upon which this story is based, that is, of the other birds adopting and warming the solitary thistle goldfinch, was observed near Northampton, Massachusetts, where robins and other migratory birds sometimes spend the winter in the thick pine woods. End of The Bird's Christmas by F.E. Mann.
All right, kiddos. We will conclude with a moment of questions. Do you have any questions for Santa Claus? I will wait. This has been a great night, a great Thanksgiving. Now the spotlight is on me for the whole month of December. I will be here every night at 6:15. We will start at 6:20, reading stories every night until Christmas Eve. I don't see any questions coming through. And it's probably close to all of yours bedtimes. So, good night, Shelby. Good night, Lily. Good night, Matthew. Like I said, you guys have all been great this year. I am so proud of you. Until tomorrow, good night, sweet dreams, and Merry Christmas! Ho, 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 ho! Good night, guys.